Is it 2018 already? Postdoc, the New Orleans ACS meeting is coming up. I need data. Again. Yeah, I got a little bit of data to present, but you know, I really need some new equipment. New equipment. Well, time to make it rain.
Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Woo! Nice. This is awesome. You have no excuses now.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Hello, everybody. For all of you who are here watching us today, my name is Alex. I'm one of the electrochemists at Pine Research. Neil is off today, and so if you're watching this now on the live stream, if you could let me know if you can hear me all right, just with the audio, please let me know. Just because Neil's normally here, he's traveling at the moment, and so I can't always determine. I just need a little bit of feedback to determine whether or not anyone can hear me. If anyone's actually watching right now. Normally I think right now it looks like we got about 2 people watching. So I guess we'll give it a few more minutes to wait for any people who are showing up. Running into a few technical difficulties this morning, as Neil normally handles this kind of stuff. However, in the meantime, I would like to spend a little bit of time just going over some of the process, the guidelines, things like this. So first and foremost, this is the live stream. You can ask us anything about electrochemistry. We get a lot of questions either by email or webinar or on our YouTube channel, Twitter, whatever it may be. We do get quite a few questions from people, and while we can answer some of those questions via email or via a chat comment, sometimes the answers are a little bit more complex and require a little bit more elaboration to really answer them completely. And so that's what this format is for. It's for trying to answer those questions with a little bit more detail, at least as much as we possibly can. And really, you can ask any question that you want. It can be on cyclic voltammetry, open circuit potential, EIS, how potentiostats work, anything about electrochemistry, and we'll try our best to answer those questions. Now, depending on how many questions we get, we usually aim for this format to be between like maybe 1 to 2 hours long. It could be a bit shorter if there's not that many questions. And of course, it could be longer if we get lots of questions, lots of engagement, things like that. Again, Neil isn't here, so we won't be bouncing back and forth between answering questions. So I apologize for that. I also realize it might be summertime, and a lot of people are maybe on vacation around this time. So if it's a little bit light on attendance, that's okay. A couple other housekeeping things is we're using Zoom currently as the broadcasting platform. It's the quote encoder that gets fed into YouTube that is then used for communicating. So please let me know. So what we've at least observed is there's about a 20-second delay between what is said on Zoom and what actually and then when we see something in the chat. So if you type something in and you don't hear us respond immediately, or in this case, hear me respond immediately, just be mindful of that. It's not that we're ignoring you. We're either answering a bunch of questions, or we are we're trying to, or there's just a delay. That's the point, just a delay. We actually will be in the future moving away from Zoom. We've had some issues with Zoom recently, just with their platform. And so, which actually may be a blessing in disguise because we'll be able to upgrade our streaming capabilities and hopefully make it a little bit easier to communicate with you guys about stuff. I can't remember all of the housekeeping things off the top of my head, but basically, I'm going to apologize in advance if you have a question and I mispronounce your name. Neil and I are Americans, and so sometimes pronouncing names. We get a lot of people from all over the world who are asking us questions, typing them into the chat, but sometimes to address you, it's a little bit hard for us to say your name. So we apologize in advance for any mispronunciations that we have. A couple things to keep in mind, again, just as we wait for any questions that might come into the chat, is that, let's see, what other housekeeping things do I have? Oh, the housekeeping things. We'll have a live stream next week, but the week after that, both Neil and I will be out of town, and neither of us can actually do the live stream. I am doing this other electrochemistry workshop at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And then, what is it? Neil is also traveling. He is going to be at a regional ACS meeting in Bozeman, Montana. So if you see us at any of those events, please say hello and let us know that you like watching the live stream and stuff like that. So right now, again, let me know if you are watching. Please let me know if you could hear me. If not, type it into the chat because I have somewhat limited information on that. So right now, I'm going to wait for any questions to arrive. Right now, we didn't get any questions previously from because sometimes you can ask stuff during the break. Or in between chats, and we might be able to address those questions ahead of time, but we didn't get any of those. So if there are no questions, we won't answer any. But I'm going to leave this on. I'm actually going to put the music on, the little thing, for a little bit of time. But again, ask any questions you have into the chat, and once we get them, I'll start answering them. But if we don't get anything within the next I would say 10-15 minutes or so, then we will close the live stream early and then resume on the following week. So again, let me know if you do have any questions, as I'm still getting used to a couple minor things on Zoom. Okay, but I'll keep an eye out in the chat. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna share some awesome live stream weightings things. Don't mind the time. That will just happen. Okay. Okay, well, that was a really quick break. It looks like we do have some people starting to come in to ask questions. So I see Jay Pittman is asking for to see if he can ask a question. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time before people actually come in to ask questions. So I'll let people do that. I don't know. I just didn't see anybody on for a little bit. Again, there will be a delay between when I see the question, when you see the response, and of course what's on Zoom. So I'm always using a little bit of the live feed. So, but I will wait patiently if there are some questions. I'll also, let's see, double check some of these things. So I guess actually I might as well just talk about a couple things if while I wait for some questions. And of course, I'll just wait for some people to show up. Again, please type your questions into the chat. Let me make sure. I think everything's working on Zoom. Again, normally Neil is here. I feel like I'm repeating myself, which I am because there's no electrochemistry questions so far. So let's see. Okay. All right. So we have our first question. So, or at least we have the beginning of a question from Jay Pittman. Thank you, Jay. Thanks so much for the video about using a shunt in EIS. I'm a beginner in electrochemistry. The shunt has helped me achieve that high frequency semicircle. But my question, and we'll see whether or not I'll be able to answer it because Neil is the EIS expert and he does know a lot more information about shunts and the nature of reference electrodes and things like that. So let's see. Does the shunt have any negative impact on the lower frequency data? So the shunt does have an impact on the lower frequency data. There have been instances where you will actually get two different Nyquist plots depending on whether or not you use a shunt. So this is a strange and interesting phenomenon, and I honestly do not know what is correct and what's incorrect when it comes to the high and low frequency impedance data. But here is a little bit of background information about kind of shunts and just measuring EIS. So I'm going to go to Zoom. Let me just do annotate. Where is, oh, I know, hold on. Again, sometimes Zoom is a little, okay. So hopefully you all can see my screen. So when you're doing any electrochemistry experiment, and I know this is a 3 electrode system. So this is a 3 electrode system because you're using a shunt. But basically when you're doing EIS, when you write your circuits and your various circuit models, you look at stuff like this. All right, so this is just a Randall's element. And you have these 2 points, right? You have these 2 terminals. And in a regular circuit, this makes perfect sense. It's like, okay, you apply a potential between 2 points, you have current flow between these 2 points. But what happens when you have this kind of third reference electrode? And the reference electrode is the shunt, right, in this case. Well, what's happening is that EIS, or impedance, right, Z, the impedance, I believe is equal to the, let's see, V is equal to IR. So the impedance is voltage. I just want to make sure I get that right. Voltage divided by the current. Okay, so just in general, and of course this is a function of the frequency, but when we measure the voltage in a 2 electrode system, it's very simple to measure the voltage between 2 points. But in a 3 electrode system, you're kind of measuring the voltage between a reference and a working electrode, right? So that's what you're doing. Sorry, I'm just looking at things. So that's what you're doing when you have a 3 electrode system, is you have the voltage is between working and reference. So this is working reference. And then the current is actually between the working and counter electrode, not country, counter electrode. So there's information. So because the reference is changing, the voltage and how it's being measured, relatively speaking, is also changing. And this happens at the low frequency region in EIS. If you do these two EIS experiments, you will get different results. And I know that maybe this isn't a very good or clear answer. And so Jay, please let me know if you want further clarification. But because the potential is measured between this reference point, and there's, the voltage is measured between these two paths that it can go through, because the shunt is either, you have your, I think, traditional reference electrode, right? And there's some kind of frit at the bottom. Okay, so but then there's also, like, I believe it's a capacitor with a with just like a platinum wire, something like that. So that's your shunt. And so once you get into the low frequency region, this starts to be the primary reference electrode at low frequencies. And this gets used at high frequencies because just because it's easy, because there's a capacitor here, the impedance is minimal or almost practically zero here when actually measuring it to the reference lead of your cable, while the impedance is super high between in this kind of setup with a traditional reference electrode, aka some kind of silver chloride reference electrode with a silver wire and some solution. The impedance is super high. So you're gonna get some kind of mixed response, is what I've observed. And I honestly don't know how different those things are gonna be. So I don't know. I hope that was somewhat helpful, Jay. Please let me know if you have any kind of further questions about that. I'm sorry if I can't be too much more specific. All right, so we have some other questions. Hello everybody who are coming in. Let's see. Salan Bahardi says hi, thank you. And then is this? Oh, I want to make sure I'm kind of up to date with the live stream feed. Okay. Sumita Patil says, when we are doing electrochemical study of 3-electrode CGD, can't reach up to CV vertex 0.2 at low current density. Why? Is it related to resistance? If yes, it affects on EIS too. Is the effect on EIS too? So I don't actually know what CGD is. And maybe I need a little bit more specificity. But when you mention that you can't reach up to CV vertex point at low current density, this sounds like a compliance voltage issue, Sumita. So, and let me, and Sumita, please comment if you if this is correct or not. But what you mean to say is that when you're doing a cyclic voltammetry experiment, make sure I have this correct. So this is your CV, and this is your current. Let's say you told the potentiostat sweep from -1 volt to +1 volt. I'm just making these numbers up. And let's just say that -1 is here. And let's just say +1 is here. Okay, I'm just making this up. You told it to sweep between these 2 points. And maybe in the beginning of your experiment, you get something like this. Okay. But then eventually the voltammogram comes back here and does something like that. Again, making it up. It never actually reaches the +1 volt range. It never gets to +1 volt. Okay. So that's what I'm assuming you're talking about. And let me just check the chat quickly. Okay, Sumita saying GCD, galvanometric charge discharge. Oh, okay, so this is a battery experiment. It seems like, okay, so this is a battery experiment. Okay, so if that's the case, it's probably not okay, so it's probably not then a compliance voltage issue. Of course, it might be a compliance voltage issue, but if it's a low current density, then that's probably not the case. Let me think a little bit more about that. Just to see. Oh, Neil's commenting. Thanks. Okay, so by CV, you mean constant voltage or cyclic voltammetry? Ah, that's another point of specification. Thank you, Neil, for letting me know. So, galvanometric charge discharge vertex 0.2. Why is this is most likely a problem with your battery construction. Okay, so yeah, so this has nothing to do. Hi, Neil. Hi, thanks. I hope your travels are going well. Let me stop sharing because this looks a little ridiculous. But okay. It could be the resistance, and as Neil said, it might be based on battery construction. The thing I was suggesting, again, it's not it seems like it's not related to the amount of current, although it could be. Potentiostats can run into these compliance voltage issues. Constant voltage. Okay, so he's saying constant voltage. So I had that completely wrong. All right, so I had that completely wrong. But he said electrochemical. So this is a 3 electrode system. So that means if it's a 3 electrode system, are you still using a battery? So Sumita, if you can clarify, is this actually a battery or is this a traditional 3 electrode experiment with like a reference, and a counter electrode? So if Neil is saying if you are endlessly pumping and current and voltage isn't reaching the upper limit, probably being apart electrolyte. That could also be, yeah, you could also be hitting just like the electrolyte limit. And Neil is also saying it means your C rate is probably not high enough and it would take 20 hours or something crazy like that. Otherwise, you're not actually charging even though you think you are. Yeah, that's also another. That's a good possibility. And like, Sumita, I hope that this is helpful. Please comment some more. Okay, that was a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know very much about. So Sumita, if you want to add more clarification between Neil and I as we make comments on this thing, please do so. I'm going to try to get to some other questions. I'm sorry if I'm unable to answer it. To answer these questions well. We're just trying to understand a little bit more about the system. Let's see. So this might not be my day because all the questions are EIS, which is not my not my strong suit, sort of say. All right. Shubham Rawat says, hello. Sometimes in HF, hydrofluoric acid, we observe the EIS curves. Oh no, high frequency, sorry. At high frequency, we observe the EIS curves appearing from the negative axis. Also, at low frequency, the EIS arc is curved back at the intercept on the x-axis and then again rises up. Some say it's absorbance. How? This sounds like an infamous inductive loop, Shubham. So just kind of looking at, again, just let me know if this is what you're seeing. But if your Nyquist plot is this, and this is Z real, this is real impedance, and then you have Z negative, Z imaginary. What you're getting is something where I believe the Z imaginary is starting somewhere here at the high frequency region, maybe. Okay, maybe it's starting there, or it's starting here, which wouldn't make much sense to have high impedance, negative real impedance. But you're having something like this, it's arcing, and then you're getting something like this, where you're getting some kind of this inductive loop behavior. So if you can clarify, and let me actually get out of this annotate so I can at least watch to see if you have any comments on this. But if this is the case, this is one of these strange inductive loops that I find to be difficult to really understand conceptually what's happening. I've spoken to Neil a lot about what this process could actually be. I even spoke to someone at the Electrochemical Society about it. I think that in the high frequency region, when you get this, I would say, positive imaginary impedance, so not negative imaginary impedance, you're looking at maybe cable capacitance. There is induction in the cell cables at high frequency based on the just the equation for an inductor in EIS. And so there is this inductive loop, and Neil has done some kind of CV advanced EIS webinars on this topic where you can use an inductor to model those. Now, I have heard people say that it is absorbance, and which I am more likely to agree with. The idea being that, and again, I'll go to Zoom, or I'll go to PowerPoint and I'll start to annotate. But the idea is that, when you have a sine wave that's very long, this is low frequency sine wave. So again, let's just say this is the line that's like time, right? So it's time. And then this is your amplitude, your EIS amplitude. At the low frequency, there's a whole bunch of time when an absorptive process or an oxidation reduction process is occurring. Let me make this another color so it's a little bit easier to see. Now that didn't make it very easy to see, but you get the picture that there are these big parts of time in the low frequency region where a process can occur, an electrochemical process. And this happens in corrosion, most notably, but it happens in a lot of others. And in this case, you do get some form of adsorbance or some kind of chemistry that is changing the surface. And so I mentioned that the impedance is a voltage over the current. And so the only way you can get kind of a negative impedance comes from having not so much looking at the absolute value of the voltage over current, but kind of the change in the voltage over the current. And you're getting, say, less current as you move forward, or not less current, you're getting more current, so that you're getting this, whatever it is, to make this a negative number at a low frequency region. And so I do think that you are probably seeing some adsorbance from your system, inductive loops. So that's what I think is happening. Now, normally, I think that this is what people say is happening in the when impedance is happening and you're getting these inductive loops. We model them using inductors because it's convenient, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's, say, accurate, sort of say. So there are other ways to try to model this inductive loop behavior. And I just don't know how to do that. I think there are a lot of chemists who have talked about it and have figured stuff out about it. So Shubham Arwat, I hope this was helpful. If you want me to elaborate a little bit more, but I want to make sure I answered your question, because I think I'm rambling on a little bit too much. But the idea is that during the low frequency region, there are long stretches of time where the potential is being held at a point where the surface is changing. And I know that kind of goes against some of the principles of impedance, that the system must remain stable. during an EIS experiment, stability. And of course, if the system is changing, then it's not stable, but that seems to not matter from what I can tell. So the system is changing, it is absorbing, and you're getting an instance where you have, say, less current or more current at a lower frequency. And it ultimately ends up leading to these inductive loops and this arcing. So that's the process that people believe it to be. I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if you want some additional clarification or if you want to talk more about it. But if that's the case, I'll move on and see if I can answer as much as I can. Okay. From Salan Bahadari, I am purging oxygen. So, oops, I clicked away. I am purging oxygen and running square wave voltammetry, coding working electrode with my biologic sample. How can I reduce noise in signature peak? Okay, that's a great question. So I think it will depend on the kind of noise that you're getting and what that noise particularly looks like. I'll be honest, I don't know enough about square wave voltammetry. I'm trying to think whether or not there are some parameters that you can change in the square wave voltammogram that can reduce the noise, such as the step length and the duration, and whether or not those reduce noise. Now, one question is, are you continuously purging oxygen while running square wave voltammetry? Because that will ultimately play a role as well in the noise. Typically, electrochemistry experiments are done after you have added oxygen or added some kind of gas into your system, and then you shut the gas off so that you're not creating convective modes of mass transport. Like all of the signal, I believe, associated with square wave voltammetry and most voltammetries is, except for RDE and stuff, is based on diffusion being the primary mode of mass transport in your system. So that's just one question, is are you purging with oxygen while running simultaneously? And you might want to stop the purging so that you have a relatively stagnant solution during this case. The other questions I would have are, what are the electrode range settings? And then just kind of the nature of the noise. Now, you say that there's noise in the signature peak. So I'm assuming that you're getting one peak and there's a lot of noise occurring at that point. Sometimes that noise may be due to if you have a lot of oxygen with a biological sample, you may be generating a gas and there's little micro bubbles popping. This is something that happens when you're doing, say, a hydrogen evolution reaction or something like that. And so you'll get these spikes of noise at the signature peak specifically. A couple of things you can start to do is like increasing the sample rate. Are you sampling enough times? And that's a way of kind of averaging out the noise, or at least once you get enough data points, you can start to average the noise out. You may pick an electrode range that's big enough that doesn't seem to be an issue. It's a little hard without seeing the data. How, is this noise specifically associated with just that peak, or is it noise associated with the entire voltammogram? So those are kind of my questions. And maybe even what happens when you do cyclic voltammetry to your biological sample, or differential pulse voltammetry to your biological sample. So those are, I guess, a few kind of follow-up questions. And let me see, I am going here. Okay, all right. So continuously purging. Yeah, so Salam, I would say, all right, I purge oxygen for 15 minutes before running sample and while running sample. Yeah, I think that might be one thing I would try stopping. I would definitely purge for 15 minutes prior to doing the experiment. I would turn. Oh, okay. And there's noise in the entire voltammeter. Yeah. Okay. This is very okay. Much clearer. I would definitely turn off the purging during the sample. And what you can do if you want to maintain an somewhat oxygen-rich atmosphere is we have certain types of purging apparati, so to say. And let me just share my screen very quickly just to kind of illustrate what that is. But you can have an electrochemical system, a cell. Okay. These are just like holes where you can put your electrodes in, stuff like that. And then they're not important, but this is your solution. And you can have, you probably have a purging tube that goes in and it's bubbling, gas is going in, oxygen, O2 in. So you got these bubbles here. These bubbles are going here. But you may also want to have, and we actually sell a thing that can do this. I'll demonstrate in the middle, not as a separate attachment, but as another thing. But you can also have O2 going in here, but it's just in the headspace above the solution. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me just very quickly go to Pine Research website. Dual port gas. Okay, so let me show you something. Again, give me 1 second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste the link to this item here, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So let me just share my screen. All right, so hopefully you can see this. This is a dual port gas inlet. Okay, so I think you should hopefully be able to see this. So one of these tubes, so if you have a gas, some gas coming in, it goes in through one, and then it goes into this sparging apparatus. This is what's going to degas or put oxygen into your solution. And then you also have oxygen here that's just going to cover the headspace above the solution. So what you can do is purchase, I believe it's a T or a cross as the type of gas valve. So when you switch it to one location, it purges oxygen through. And then when you switch it to the next, it just blankets the top and it stops this. All of that solution moving around and bubbling is probably causing a lot of noise in your voltammogram. So this is a product that we use, a type of piece of glassware that can be used to solve that type of problem. So hopefully that is helpful. Okay. All right. And if you have any questions, please let me know for further clarification. All right, let's see. Ferris Whitehouse. Okay, I'm a battery hobbyist and I'm trying to figure out if I should buy a potentiostat. Do you have any opinion? Do you have any opinion cheaper, maybe option cheaper Alibaba potentiostats for like 2K? Stay away, good enough. So this is a good question. This is a very good question. First off, it's going to depend on, so first and foremost, full disclaimer. I work for a company that sells potentiostats, and so I'm a little more biased to our own potentiostat. All that being said, I want to just tell you as much truth about it. I don't know anything about potentiostats that you'll find on Alibaba. It's also going to depend on what you're trying to do with the potentiostat, the voltage range, the current range, things like that. If you're just going to do cyclic voltammetry back and forth, the specifications that you're going to be looking for, Ferris, will just be, what's the voltage range? What's the current range? If you're a battery hobbyist, I don't know if you're going to do EIS. That's what a lot of battery scientists do, but you might not necessarily need it for what you're trying to do. $2,000, I think, isn't necessarily a bad price for a potentiostat, especially if it's pre-owned. I think pre-owned, that's not bad. That's actually a pretty good price, but I would want to know what the brand is, which potentiostat it's like what company is the potentiostat coming from, because while I'm going to promote Pine Research potentiostats at the same time, I think there are also some potentiostat companies you might want to just stay away from, and trying to get this, you might want to just stay away from. But yeah, hey, and if you want to, you can contact us. I'm sure we can hook you up with a pre-owned potentiostat as well. That's that meets your price range, that also fits to your stuff. So Ferris, contact us if you want something that's around 2K or even less expensive than that. But we need to know what your things are. I also wrote a paper. This is also another opportunity for me to create a shameless plug. I wrote a quick thing about potentiostats. I've written a lot of things about potentiostats actually, but let me just do practical. To choosing the choosing. All right, so I'm gonna put this link in the description of this link into the chat, Ferris. And it's just an article I wrote about choosing potentiostats, what kind of specifications you want to look for and whether they're important. They're not always necessarily for batteries, but just something to keep in mind. Hopefully that was helpful. Please let me know if you have any further questions. All right. So Greg Villasana, I hope I pronounced that right. Hi, could you recommend bibliography of a course for easy? I think you're I think I need a little more specification. I think you want a course for understanding electrochemistry or a course for understanding voltammetry or electrochemistry. Is that correct? I mean, we did have a previous episode about a variety of books for understanding electrochemistry. And then of course the Pine Research YouTube channel has lots of videos and resources for understanding electrochemistry. So hopefully that's is there a course? I think personally, I think that the quote like cyclic voltammetry bootcamp that I run is probably one of the easier courses for understanding. There are the Electrochemical Society has courses. They have short courses associated with their meetings. These would be in-person meetings. So, but if you have anything in particular that you want, that you're interested in learning, please let me know. I've seen some big courses that are very general, that I don't think really help. They cover a broad range of things, but when you have a very specific problem you're trying to solve, that's when you learn things the best. So so ask me if you have any, if you need more recommendations. All right, let's see. So hello, Kanav. Good to hear from you. And Salon, hello. And let's see. Azhur Udin Shomik, please make videos on electroanalytical methods, complete playlist from Bangladesh. I'll put it on the list of things to do. Okay, so yeah, so Ferris, thanks for the comment. So Ferris, email us. I'm gonna write it, the email address here. Here, so Ferris, that email address, pinewire@pineresearch.com, is the best email address you should reach out to us for when it comes to just asking us about pre-owned potentiostats. And we can definitely have a longer email or in-person conversation, not in person, but like a Zoom conversation about what you're looking for and what kind of potentiostats. And I can also check to see if we have some stuff in stock that would be inexpensive. That could help you with your hobbyist stuff, things like that. Okay, Shubham says, thanks. I have one more question though. Usually we perform EIS in potentiostatic mode and the charge discharge curves in galvanostatic mode. How do we decide which mode is suitable for which process? That's a great question. So it would be nice if we just had one mode for everything, but some things are a little bit better than others for different reasons. So Neil has commented a little bit about which mode to use EIS on, whether it's potentiostatic or galvanostatic. And some of this has to do a little bit with the impedance and how easy it is to measure different values, sort of say. And this really has a lot to do, at least in my opinion, with the ability for us to measure the current versus measuring the potential or applying potential and stuff like that. And this is just how potentiostats are designed. So potentiostats have a lot of, like, typically cyclic voltammetry is hands down the most commonly used technique in electrochemistry. And measuring the current is the most important thing. And there's a huge range of currents that people measure. They measure milliamps of current, they measure nanoamps, even femtoamps of current. So because there's such a, but the only voltage that they actually apply may only be like between plus and 4 volts, plus minus 4 volts, maybe plus minus 10 or 15 volts. And so, and even the knowledge of what we know and want to know about the voltage only goes to maybe microvolts in terms of detail. Okay, so you have this huge range in current, and then you have this very small, range, relatively speaking, in voltage. So potentiostats are all designed in such a way that the voltage range is relatively small and the current range is relatively big with precise measurements. So what does that mean for you? It means that when you're doing, say, a potentiostatic EIS experiment, you're trying to measure current that's in a very precise small value. And the potentials, it's okay to measure potentials with, well, I would say, a decent amount of error. You don't need to know the potential to multiple significant figures. Now, in a charge discharge experiment with like a galvanostat, that's really because I think maybe the answer to your question has to do with the implications for controlling one and allowing the other one to move around. So let's see if I can give you perhaps a more succinct answer. But like with EIS and potentiostatic mode, we usually choose potentiostatic because the current values that we're measuring are relatively small. You only have picked galvanostatic EIS when the current tends to be actually very large. And that means your resistance is very small and you tend to get better values that way. And then with charge discharge, I actually don't know enough about it, but I think the idea is current, like literally the potential can be very high, and the current, the current is the thing. Like if the current gets too big, that's, I think, when explosions really occur. It's the rate of a kinetic thing. So if you just tell it, hey, apply this huge potential, the current can just go anywhere and it can blow stuff up. It can just kind of go crazy. And so that may be one reason why we want to control things galvanostatically. This is at least, and hopefully this helps you think a little bit more about the process with which, whether you choose potentiostatic or galvanostatic for your experiments. This also matters on what you're trying to measure. If you want to measure the potential, then you have to pick a galvanostatic experiment and allow the potential to change. If you want to control the current, well, then you need to, if you want to measure the current, sorry, then you need to allow the potential to change while the current varies. I hope I got those. I hope I got those right. So, Subham Rawat, I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if you need further clarification. Sometimes I can just ramble on about this, but I'm hoping that this is at least helpful. Okay, Kanav, I have a question. I get the same current peak on my 30th and 40th cycle, and then suddenly the peak jumps for the 50th cycle. I can't understand why. Running CV. I'm not so sure either. I think I would need to know a little bit more, and maybe Neil would also comment on this, well, at least when he's here, because he knows a little bit more about batteries. But I think we would need to know a little bit more about your specific system. If things are very stable all of a sudden, and then there's a spike or a jump. My first inclination is that, you know, you've reached a certain point. I feel like every time you cycle, you know, something is happening, and then all of a sudden you've kind of reached your threshold, and then by 50 it's something else has happened. You've reached the threshold, and now it's doing another process. That's what I guess from that, Kanav. And sometimes I've observed when someone's doing an experiment and say they hold the potential for a long time and let the current just kind of drift, eventually there's something that happens way later down the road. Well, that's because whatever process was occurring, it was based on, say, the consumption of a material. Well, eventually that material goes away, and the potentiostat is still set in a way that, like, hey, I need to get to this potential, so I need other processes to occur to make it that way. And if you're doing something like let's see what's doing. Okay, Kanav is giving me a little bit more details on this. I'm running CV with graphite electrodes against platinum, silver chloride in heavily concentrated nitric acid. 5 molar nitric acid is a lot. Okay, so in this case, okay, so this is just cyclic voltammetry then. Okay, then it's just suddenly jumps at the 50th cycle. I am wondering whether or not, okay. So this doesn't have to do with battery stuff. This has to do with just cycling a cyclic voltammogram back and forth normal times, graphite electrode and platinum with silver chloride. I wonder if silver chloride is stable in 5 molar nitric acid. I want to say no. I will also reiterate on my previous point, something has happened during the cycling process where some chemical reaction has occurred, and now another thing is occurring. I would need to probably see the voltammograms to really make an adjustment on it. So Kanav, if you want to write a little bit more about that, let me know if there's also like a peak shift that's occurring. Like, oh, in the next cycle, this, you know, the peak current increases by, say, 20%, and all of the peaks are kind of the same, overlapping on each other numerous times. You know, let me know if that is the case as well. So if you can comment on that, that would be helpful. I will try to answer some other questions in the meantime. Let's see. As Harudin Shomilk, what's the difference between Debye-Huckel theory and Debye-Huckel limiting law? I haven't heard of those in a long time, so I'm actually going to look that stuff up quickly. So, let's see. Debye. Let me hold on 1 second. Let's see. Debye-Huckel. Let's see. Debye-Huckel theory the bicycle theory was proposed. I'm just actually looking at Wikipedia right now to see if I can't get some kind of general idea about what they're talking about. As a theoretical explanation for the department of ideality in solutions of electrolytes and plasmas, it is a linearized Poisson-Boltzmann model, which assumes an extremely simplified model of electrolyte solution, but nevertheless gave accurate predictions by means of activity coefficients for ions in dilute solution. Okay, and then Debye-Huckel limiting law. Let's see what that is. And then let's see if there's some extra stuff. Okay. Debye-Huckel limiting law. One is proportional to I would honestly need to do a little bit more research into this to give you an accurate explanation. Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like this has to do with the ionic strength. The ionic strength of an electrolyte solution. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if I can answer your question, because frankly I'm not that smart. But I will move on to so again, apologize. Let's see. Prashant Paul, what is the difference between EIS of EDLC and pseudocapacitance? Why in, I think it's maybe nickel oxide carbon composite supercapacitor is used? Why not 1 molar sulfuric acid? Which one is better to calculate capacitance from? CV or GCD? Let's see. Let's see. So, can you tell me again what the EDLC is? I never, Prashant, if you can tell me what an EDLC is, because I, or no, you're talking about the electrical double layer capacitance. That's what you're referring to. Is that correct, Prashant? Please clarify. I think that's what you're talking about. And then pseudo capacitance. If that's what you're talking about, electrical double layer capacitance, then I think I can answer your question. So the electrical double layer is one of the most complex things in electrochemistry that confuses people. I'm going to try to draw this relatively fast. So so if I have a working electrode, and let's say that this working electrode has a net positive charge on the surface. So I'm applying a positive charge to the electrode surface. It's got something like this. And then let's say I got some ions. I'm going to make them a different color. So I have some ions here that are somewhat adsorbed or irreversibly adsorbed to the electrode surface. So I got these minus ions. All right. The capacitance of the electrical double layer is between these two points. This is the electrical double layer. Now remember that and I'm just going to double check to make sure that I think I got this right. So this is the capacitance of the electrical double layer, and it's super high because for like a 3 millimeter hour diameter electrode in an electrolyte solution, and you apply some potential, the capacitance is like 25 microfarads or something like that, which is enormous for something that big. You know, that's like a thing that's maybe like this big, and it's happening on the thing that's like this big, super big. So the capacitance, the electrical double layer capacitance is this. And remember that a capacitor is two oppositely charged parallel plates with an insulator in between them. And that's what a capacitor is. Now, the thing that's very important is that it's not so much that there's always an insulator between them, but the fact that the charge does not combine. So it's really just about charge separation. When you have charge here and you have charge here, the distance between these is super small. The charge isn't combining. The electrons are not moving into the metal. That's not a Faradaic process. It's non-Faradaic charging. And so this capacitance is very big because you're talking about a distance on the order of an atomic radii, right? Like you have a metal atom that's charged, and then you have an ion that's charged, and the distance is just like 2 atomic radii. So it's very, very small, but you can get a lot of charge between these two. So that, in my opinion, that is the electrical double layer capacitance. It's that. Now, pseudo-capacitance, from my very limited understanding, is kind of like this, but it's non-ideal. It's the case where, and actually I'm gonna erase this because I want to use this. But it's the case where, like, well, maybe you don't have a perfect capacitor. You actually have some other, solvent molecules here. And then you have something that's a minus charge, and then you have something that's like a minus charge, and then you have something here and here. And basically, you don't have something that's a perfect capacitor in the sense of how we think about it. And that's when you use something like EIS, and you don't have you model it with like a CPE, a constant phase element, where alpha is not 1. It's some fraction, like maybe 0.7 or 0.8. Alpha to the 0.7 or 0.8 is something like that. That's like pseudo capacitance from my understanding of it. So I hope that was helpful in describing that particular issue. And let me let's see if I can look. Yes, electrical double layer capacitance. Hopefully that answers your question, Prashant, about electrical double layer capacitance and pseudo capacitance. You also asked why nickel oxide carbate's supercapacitant. So this is the difference between alkaline and sulfuric acid. I don't know. Is going to be I don't know enough about these nickel oxide carbon composites. Whether it's between you have an alkaline system, very, very basic, 6 molar potassium hydroxide electrolyte versus 1 molar sulfuric acid, which is very acidic. So I have 2 different electrolyte systems, 2 different pHs. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why one is used rather than the other. Maybe it's a chemical compatibility thing, because just the way acids and bases operate with one another. So sorry, I can't give you a good answer for why that is, because I don't do any like supercapacitor work. Which is better to calculate capacitance from CV or GCD? I don't know enough about this galvanostatic discharge. I only know about calculating capacitance from cyclic voltammetry because I can change the scan rate. And it's very easy to see. Let's see. Yeah, and you can just kind of change the scan rate and see the capacitance grow for such a system. I don't know. So that's just my understanding. At the same, if you want capacitance in like in farads, microfarads, Prashant, I think ECS is EIS, impedance spectroscopy is probably the best. It will, because when you do a circuit fit, you'll be able, and then do the fit of your EIS data, you'll get a capacitance value in microfarads. But otherwise, you'll have to back calculate capacitance through CV. But let me show you, Prashant. Actually, I've been kind of watching some of the other questions, but let me show you generally the little I know about determining the capacitance in cyclic voltammetry. So in your CV, voltage, current, that's not current, that's voltage. You have current. And when you have capacitance, let's say you have a non-Faradaic process, let's scan in a very small area, you'll get a kind of box looking thing. It may look a little bit like this. Something along these lines. Actually, this will curve a little bit like so. But this here, this distance is the current associated with double layer charging, electrical double layer charging, and the capacitance. And the equation is that the current is equal to the capacitance times dV dt, which is the scan rate. It's just the change in voltage over change in time. So change scan rate. Let me take my own device and then change. So change scan rate, measure current, and then plot I equals C times dV dt, and then the slope should be equal to your current in farads. So that, I think that's relatively easy, Prashant, for measuring the capacitance when you're looking at just a small non-Faradaic region of your cyclic voltammogram. So hopefully that's helpful. All right, going further. So just kind of, all right. Let me just try to, let's see if I can answer some of the quote easier questions first. You can put any links you want in the chat to ResearchGate. Please note that Pine Research is not associated with any research institution. So if it's just a link without an open access PDF, I won't be able to read it. But if there is some information on it, I can probably do a little bit of research. But if you really want me to read a PDF, you'll have to email the PDF to me for me to actually read it. Just cause not that I'm trying to be difficult. I literally don't have access to it. Okay, Alex, how to check good or bad electrode working in reference experimentally by Salan Bahandari. This is a great question. So, oh, and then Kavan also has, you can Google how to verify revenue. I don't remember the exact procedure. Yeah, so there's a couple things you can do to experimentally measure and to check whether your working or reference electrode is good or bad. First thing you should try to do, the easiest thing, is run a CV or open circuit potential experiment with a well-characterized system like ruthenium hexamine or ferrocyanide or something like that. That will help you test the working electrode. If the current is really bad, so for example, if your working electrode is dirty, so there's a couple things that are going to happen. Let's look at case one. Working electrode, let's see. Let's make this a little clearer. So case one, working electrode isn't working. So what's going to happen if the working electrode's not working or has an issue, there's usually two things, or two things that can happen. Sorry, not that. So there's kind of two sub things. One is electrode is dirty. There's stuff stuck on the surface, or electrode has internal disconnect. So the pin that you're connecting with your lead of the potentiostat, the cell cable lead, to the electrode that's in solution, there's a connection in between that's disconnected. So that's bad. So there are these two problems. All right, so if the electrode is dirty in your cyclic voltammogram, you will notice that for the exact same system, so normally you have this nice, beautiful looking voltammogram, maybe something like that. I don't know if it's good. If your electrode is dirty, and we will use brown to indicate dirty, you'll get something like this. You're going to get less current for the exact same system. So if you're measuring significantly less current, ideally that means there are less active sites available for the redox species to undergo a process. So experimentally, polish your electrode, clean it, have a good system, and then understand what, have the same area, and then understand what is a typical area you should get. A typical current you should get here. And then if your electrode is dirty and there's no active sites or something stuck on the surface, you get less of it. So this current will be down. It may even be shifted ever so slightly. So that's if the electrode is dirty. Now, if the electrode has an internal disconnect, you're going to get no current. All right, during your voltammogram. This will actually overlap with one another, the line. So if the electrode has an internal disconnect, current is equal to 0 because current flows through the working electrode. And if the electrode is disconnected, no current is going to flow into your cell cable. You're going to get noise. And what your potentiostat will measure, what it will show, which you may not recognize as noise, but if you're expecting microamps of current and you get picoamps of current here, there's probably a disconnect, or even nanoamps of current, right? Nanoamps of current, you're going to have a disconnect, especially if you expect maybe 10 or 100 microamps of current. So that's experimentally how you determine if the working electrode is dirty or is working experimentally. Now, the reference electrode is another thing. So we've spoken a lot about reference electrodes and what has to be the case with reference electrodes. But reference electrodes, typically what happens is reference electrodes, I would say this is what I tell people to do for reference electrode testing to make sure it works. So have two reference electrodes. One is the master, one is a master reference, and then one is a test reference. And what you're going to do is you're going to set up a 2 electrode experiment in like 0.1 molar KCl or just some electrolyte, dilute, not super dilute, decently conductive electrolyte. And this is the idea. You're going to run an OCP experiment. So I should have written that. Run OCP against the 2 reference electrodes. And these reference electrodes are the same. These are 2 of the same reference electrodes, like silver chloride. So have 2 references, 2 AgAgCl reference electrodes. Okay. So that's the idea. Let me just continue to make sure I am, this is good. Okay. So 2 AgAgCl reference electrodes. Now what you're going to do is run an open circuit potential experiment, which is where you measure the potential difference between these 2 reference electrodes. So here's a question. What is the potential difference between 2 silver chloride reference electrodes? I'll give you a minute as I enjoy one of these little peppermints here. Actually, they're spearmints, so they're very good. I wonder if you can hear it. Maybe you can hear that. This wrapper is very, very bad. Oh. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any answers? Almost. Okay. So no answers yet, or no answers that are correct. Let's see. So the answer is 0. The difference between two reference electrodes that are the same potential is 0, right? Which means when you run open circuit potential versus time, and this is voltage or potential, this is 0, you should get a line that looks approximately like this. Now, when you actually do it, it's going to look a little bit like this because there's noise. There's a little bit of noise. But that noise is mostly what I would call digital noise. And this is the key. I would say 10 millivolts is the upper and lower limit to what I would consider to be a good reference electrode difference. If the test reference electrode is outside of that 10 millivolt range, you need to change the inner fill solution. You need to change the reference electrode. If the reference electrode is drifting, that's also bad, right? And this time scale, I would say at least 5 minutes. This needs to be at least 5 minutes. If you're getting a bunch of drift between two reference electrodes in a very normal electrolyte solution, and this thing's drifting, that's not good. It usually indicates there's some kind of leak, and there's a big difference between these potentials. So this is bad. Let's use red. So this is bad. This is bad. But this here, if you can get a nice voltammogram here, that's good. That's really good. Okay, so that's how you test reference electrodes. Those are very good minutes. Okay, let's see if you have any follow-ups on that. But that's how you determine. That's how you check reference and working electrodes experimentally. And I'm just going to check ahead to see if Solon has questions. Solon, I hope that was helpful. Okay. Pete Venuti, what do you think about those open source potentiostat kits? So of course, as I've mentioned before, I am biased towards because I work for a company that sells potentiostats. Pete, of course, I'm going to be a little bit biased about the about my answer. So please keep that in mind. Truthfully, I actually think those kits are actually probably pretty good. In the sense of educating people on potentiostats and how they work and how they operate. I think for some experiments, it's definitely pretty helpful. You can run some very simple, small, easy CV experiments. But at Pine Research, we've got at least, off the top of my head, 3 full-time dedicated software engineers, at least 2 full-time dedicated electrical engineers. And there is so much that goes into making these potentiostats work properly, doing really complex electrochemistry experiments and outputting data and making it, making a good user interface. Those potentiostats from those open source kits can do simple things like bulk electrolysis and cyclic voltammetry, and that's good, but the noise tends to be very high, and maybe that's okay. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of engineering that goes into it, and you can either spend a little bit of extra money to buy a nice potentiostat and then start doing research and experiments off the bat, or you can spend a lot of time and try to get an open source potentiostat to work, which is a useful and educational experience, and I think it teaches you a lot. So that's kind of my take on it. It depends ultimately on what your goals are. So Pete, I hope that was helpful. I'm not opposed to open source potentiostat kits. I will tell you this: they probably don't do EIS, or they probably don't do circuit fitting. They probably don't do cyclic voltammetry simulations. They probably, I don't know what their filter settings are. But it's yeah, I hope that's helpful, Pete. Okay. Let's see, one more basic inquiry. What is the source of open circuit voltage, OCV, in a cell? Should we start our CV measurement from OCV or from a voltage below OCV, which is more precise? So, oh, hey, OPA 111 AM said the difference is 0. Hey, you got it right. I didn't see that until now. Okay, but Shubham Rawat, I think it depends on the experiment, but the open circuit voltage is the voltage. It's not the voltage where necessarily zero current occurs. It's kind of that. It's just the potential of the system. Like there's just, these two electrochemical forces pushing each other, but there's no current that flows. So it's good when you're doing an experiment and no current, no electrochemical process is occurring. So, so when it comes to precision, I think either, wherever you pick the, the potential for when you're starting an experiment, it shouldn't matter too much when it comes to precision. But I would start your CV experiment from open circuit voltage because nothing is happening. I might hold it there, and then I would step the potential or sweep the potential or do whatever from that point if it's really important. Sometimes it's not that important. Sometimes it's okay to start at 0 volts, even though there's some current at 0 volts, because your CV data shows up at like minus 500 millivolts or something. And it's like, well, if my open circuit voltage was plus 100 millivolts, and if I start at minus 100 millivolts versus my reference and all that stuff, well, I'm off by like a little bit, but it's not enough to change what my results of the CV or what my data is telling me. So, so I hope that helps. If you're doing corrosion experiments, then open circuit voltage is way, way, way more important. So it depends on what you're using and how sensitive it is. Shubham Rawat, I hope that's helpful. All right, moving on. All right, great. I'm really glad I can be helpful and helping everybody. Let's see. Sorry. This mint is very good, by the way. Hello, Alex. This is from Bapuji Mohapatra. Hello, Alex. How to measure the internal resistance impedance associated with the reference electrode? It's a very good question. So the impedance of the reference electrode, first off, I think just from an understanding, like a physical understanding, it's going to be from the potential junction between what's inside the internal fill solution and then and the frit, how resistive that is. What we've done, I've talked to Neil a little bit about this, and Neil has actually done this experiment. But I think what he's generally done is he does a 2 electrode experiment where he has like counter and reference. Actually, I think maybe he has the working electrode lead connected to one end of the reference electrode, and then the counter electrode and reference electrode lead shorted on the other side. Now he has it connected to, say, maybe a platinum wire, something very, very resistive, something very big. Get those two things as close as possible. Okay. And then do your experiment. Then do EIS of that. Because their counter electrode and reference electrode is going to push current very easily. But you're almost treating your reference electrode as if it was a working electrode. So by doing EIS or impedance, where your working electrode lead is the reference electrode. That's one way to get, say, maybe a very good estimate of the internal resistance of your reference electrode. It's not going to be perfectly accurate, but I think it's going to be pretty darn accurate to give you an idea about what the impedance of that, what that frit and the junction is. Now, of course, you want to be very careful that you don't push a lot of current into the reference electrode. You don't want that to happen. You don't want Faradaic and oxidation and reduction processes happening at the reference electrode. So that's why EIS, with a very reasonable amplitude signal at a potential centered around a potential where not a whole lot is happening is the best way to figure out what the resistance is. And usually you don't have to really, I think the high frequency stuff is actually good enough. You're really looking at the real impedance at high frequency is usually pretty good, but hopefully that's helpful. Bapuji Mohapatra. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I put a link on the graph above. Well, let me just Kanav. I put a link to the graph above. Let me see what. Maybe I missed it. Let me just check the chat very quickly, and then I'll get to the other question. I don't see the link. Maybe you could put it in the chat one more time. I'm sorry. And in the meantime, I can try to answer Adaptive Oracle's question. What is your recommended method for preparing a glassy carbon electrode for direct measurements as opposed to drop casting a catalyst? Would you change it for a plate versus a rotating disc electrode for direct measurements? So with glassy carbon, very simple. I would polish the glassy carbon electrode, and just using, say, oh yeah, maybe I haven't. Yeah, auto mod's blocking it. Maybe that might be it. Kanav. Let me look at Adaptive Oracle's question first. So I would polish the glassy carbon electrode first. So usually we use a 5 micron alumina slurry, followed by polishing with a 0.3 micron alumina slurry, followed by a 0.05 micron alumina slurry. This is a mechanical abrasing of the surface, mechanically removing bits of glassy carbon off of it to get it kind of flat. And then I might sonicate it to remove any of those alumina particles from the surface. And then I might do a little cyclic voltammetry of the glassy carbon electrode in the solution that I want to do testing on, because glassy carbon just in air is going to just pick up stuff. Stuff is just going to be on the surface, and I might want to, oxidizing and reducing it might remove it. Just prepare the surface so that it's very reproducible. It gives a very consistent electrochemical signal prior to doing any direct measurements, as you say. Let me see. You can polish the electrode and then dip it into activated charcoal solution. Yep, that's another way to go about it, Kanav. As you, however you want to prepare the electrode surface so that it's consistent. You create a consistent electrochemical response to your glassy carbon for whatever experiment you plan to do, and we change it for a plate versus an RDE. You could do either one. It depends. Rotating disc allows you can do drop casting a little bit easier. We're, of course, Pine Research, we're a fan of rotating disc electrodes. Of course, we sell electrode rotators. That's what our company is mostly known for. So, but I don't think it's necessary. You're really looking for what is it? You're really looking for is the area of the electrode very big? That's another aspect, whether it's a plate versus a rotating disc. So adaptive oracle, I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you need further, if you have further questions regarding this. Okay, so ResearchGate. So if I just do a search for keywords, ResearchGate current peak 40th cycle, 50th cycle. All right, so give me 1 second, and let me do that. Knav, and mind you, I have a lot of things open right now. So ResearchGate current peak 40th cycle, 50th cycle. And let me just go to all and not all images. So there's one article that says voltammograms of 10th, 20th, 30th, 40th, 50th cycle of the chemically deposited cuprous oxide film. I guess I'm looking for a paper with the name Knav in it. So let's see. Or ResearchGate. There's also one by Mimosa Ristova, and interesting, increase the curve cuprous oxide. Any other let me also check. Again, anyone, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm going to try to see if go to the settings to see if there's a problem with people sharing links on the live stream. So let me just see if there's a, just going to take a quick look. Give me a sec to see if there's any issues. Embedding. So comments, comments are fine. Maybe add my, yeah, okay. Let me add your name to the search. That's a good idea. Okay, so let me go back and then. Looking at stuff, but not. Fortunately, I'm not seeing it. Let's see. I'm sorry. Well, let me be a little, maybe I can be a little bit more specific with your name. I just put Knav, but maybe Knav, Dong. That didn't help. I'm sorry. You know, Knav, if you want, you can, we'll have another live stream next week. You can, of course, email stuff to us at pineWire@pineresearch.com. I'm just writing, just writing that in. Again, just that's an email. Hopefully things don't get bounced or stuff. You can also leave a comment. Like it'll be a few days before this. It'll be probably after the weekend when this video will be back up on YouTube, like with comments and stuff like that. I'm gonna put, again, actually I forgot to mention this. If you're watching this live stream afterwards, there will be some links in the description for where your questions are answered and stuff like that. We'll go back to it. So sorry about that, Knav, but hopefully we can still answer and address your questions. And if anyone else has questions, we have one from Adri Triariato. In cyclic voltammetry, the positive scan rate will be obtained the oxidation of ion and vice versa. In case of secondary battery, let's say NIMH battery, Which ion is oxidized or reduced? I don't know because I don't know what a NiMH battery is. I bet Neil knows what this answer is. But I can at least take a look to see if I can't do a quick search on that NiMH battery. What is an oh, nickel metal hydride battery. Okay, so nickel metal hydride battery, and then okay, all right. Thank you, Kanav. Let me look at if there's any battery. Let's see. I'm just gonna see if wiki. Just to see if they actually show you what the reaction is. I'm assuming it's okay, so the negative so there is a reduction. Okay, so it makes sense. Okay, so on the positive electrode side, so in the positive electrode, nickel oxohydroxide is formed. So the oxidation, let's see, the ion and vice versa. In the secondary battery, let's say, which ion is oxidized and reduced? So the ion that gets oxidized looks like it's the nickel oxide. So you go from actually, let me just share what I have on Wikipedia. But this is what I'm seeing right now just on Wikipedia. And this is just the equation. So if I just annotate it, I'm looking at this. And this is just telling me like this is the reduction. So so this is the metal, right? And this is getting actually yeah, so this is getting oxidized. This loses a proton, so it loses a proton, loses an electron plus an electron. And it looks like water is formed. There's an electron here that's goes somewhere. I think probably the metal center is what's ultimately getting the oxygen. Like that's where the electron transfer has to be occurring first, and then it moves on to the ligands. That's just my guess, but I don't know enough about nickel hydride batteries. So I'm sorry, Adri Irinato. Okay. Sorry. Nickel metal hydride battery. I wonder what. So it's nickel metal. Is there another form of nickel that is there? Is there another metal? There's another metal involved. Okay, so I'm just reading about this. So I guess there are other kinds of, yeah, so it just looks like, I guess, again, looking back at this equation, the metal is getting, the metal's getting reduced and the nickel is getting oxidized. That's at least my guess. It does turn into a hydroxide. So hydroxides are oxidized forms going from hydride. Hydroxide is an oxidation process, but yeah, I'm sorry. Don't know enough about that. Sorry. Okay. I'll give it just a few more minutes. We've been going for about a little over an hour and a half. But if that's all the questions, I'm going to say thank you all for stopping by. I'll just wait a little bit longer. Maybe I'll enjoy another one of these delicious mints and have a sip of water before we see if they have any more questions. Again, next week, hopefully, again, we're evaluating other types of streaming platforms. to instead of Zoom for doing these live streams. Zoom has been kind of acting up, and hopefully Neil and I will be back next week to run another live stream. But the week after that, that will be June 30th, we probably won't be able to do a live stream. So stay tuned to the Pine Research YouTube channel. That's where you'll see an upcoming live stream information. We also have Twitter. I might start posting a little bit more to Twitter when it comes to answering some of your questions. Okay. All right. So with that said, it looks like we don't have any more questions. I'm going to end the live stream. Thank you all so much for coming and attending, and I hope to see you all next week. All right. Take care. Bye.